Dodgers forced into an impossible decision. The World Series is here, and we get into a decision that will make a big difference for the Dodgers in this series. Hey, this is Mike Nelson. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Myself and Brad J. We're bringing you everyday Dodger content as we go into the World Series and beyond. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. As you know, the Dodgers are going to be kicking off the World Series this Friday against the Toronto Blue Jays. We now have an opponent. It's going to be out in Toronto, Game 1. And Tanner Scott remains a big talking point for the Dodgers. Tanner Scott feels healthy, ready to rejoin active roster for the World Series. As we know, Scott was dropped from the roster during the NLDS when he underwent a minor medical procedure. He was ineligible for the NLCS, but has resumed throwing and could return to the roster for the World Series. This is honestly a big development. Tanner Scott's problems are behind him, and he expects to be ready to rejoin the Dodgers' active roster for the World Series. This is from the Orange County Register. The left-handed reliever was dropped from the roster after Game 3 of the NLDS when he had to have an abscess excision on his lower body. The move made him ineligible for the National League Championship Series, but he is now eligible to be part of the World Series roster. Scott said, "It was just an infection, bad timing. I feel healthy. I definitely feel a lot better than I did coming off that Philly series, and I just wasn't feeling great." So this is honestly a big decision the Dodgers are going to have to make. Because as we know, Tanner Scott has had his problems all season long, blowing so many games during the regular season and really not having the kind of season that the Dodgers wanted him to have, right? With all the money that they signed him for and everything that was talked about during the offseason, when they acquired Tanner Scott. So this is a big decision for the Dodgers that I really think, I don't know, if you were to ask me, I would leave Tanner Scott off of the World Series roster. I know that's a very controversial decision and probably a pretty hot take that maybe not a lot of people would agree with me, but I would leave Tanner Scott off of the roster simply because of the way we saw Scott pitch, down the stretch. He did not pitch well in the month of September. Sure, he was probably dealing with, the injury, of course, that led him to miss some time here in October, but I don't know. I think it just seems a bit of a risk to bring in Scott at this point for the World Series. I know Scott is the highest paid reliever on the team. And like I talked about this months ago, if Scott is healthy, obviously was not healthy recently, and that's why he wasn't, part of the roster. But if he is healthy, I mean, the Dodgers are probably going to put him on, right? I mean, that's going to be the big decision. It's that's why I titled this video, an impossible decision, because you invested so much money, to acquire Scott in the offseason, to sign him as a free agent, and now you have this opportunity, with him potentially now being healthy and ready to go for the World Series, to once again reinsert him on the roster, or leave him off completely and stick with what you've been going with here in the last couple rounds, right? It's looked pretty good. It worked perfectly against the Brewers, right? It was great starting pitching. Yamamoto had to pitch an entire game, a complete game, first time in over 20 years that a Dodgers pitcher does that in the playoffs. Roki Sasaki has emerged as technically now the Dodgers closer, even though he was a starter during the season, and now is somewhat of a closer. Emmett Sheehan is that setup guy. So, yeah, you have a couple really good arms now that are, pitching well in the bullpen. Both of those guys are not bullpen pitchers, right? They're both starting pitchers, and they will go back to being starting pitchers, right? I mean, Sheehan and Sasaki are going to be starting pitchers for the Dodgers of the future, right? I mean, these guys will not be permanently staying in the bullpen. But right now, they're being used as bullpen guys, and they're doing pretty good jobs. So I think if they got the Dodgers to the World Series, it's kind of hard for at least if you ask me, it's kind of hard for the Dodgers now to turn around and demote these guys and put in now, Scott, or now use, Blake Treinen is still part of this roster, right? But, you don't want to use Blake Treinen in any high-pressure situations. It has not been good for Blake Treinen. And Tanner Scott, it wasn't good either, right? So whereas Sasaki has done very well in high-pressure situations, and Sheehan as well. So both of these guys have done very well in high-pressure situations here in the playoffs, and I just cannot see how the Dodgers are not going to take that into account when choosing this roster and when choosing the assignments moving forward, for the pitching, right? There's so much to talk about in the next few days, right? Because, the World Series is now here. It's Tuesday morning. The World Series kicks off in a little over 72 hours, right? Friday afternoon for us on the West Coast, 5 p.m., 8 p.m. local time out there in Toronto. Blue Jays going to be hosting game 1 and 2. But there's a lot, the big talking points, I think, for the Dodgers have to be the pitching again. Starting pitching was great during the NLCS and NLDS as well. And that has to continue, I think, for the Dodgers to win the World Series. The starting pitching has to be the key once again to the Dodgers getting this done. Because the bullpen for the Dodgers, as we know, is shaky. There's a couple starters right now that are kind of getting things done. But at any point could come apart. And who do the Dodgers go to next, right? And that's where the argument becomes to have Tanner Scott on this roster to kind of be there in case things start to go south early in this series, right? Because basically, if things go south later in the series, there's no time to turn it around, right? I mean, it's late in the series, and that would be the end of the season for the Dodgers. But if things start going south in games 1 through 3, you could see, obviously, some changes for the rest of the series, and that's where Tanner Scott comes into play. Dodgers and Blue Jays, that's going to be the World Series. The Blue Jays playing their first World Series in 32 years. First pennant since 1993. What a crazy game last night. Game 7, comeback win. George Springer, the 3-run shot in the 7th inning. One of the loudest baseball games I have ever seen, I think, that Game 7. Along with Game 5 out in Seattle. That was also a very loud game. But Game 7 was on another level. And now the Dodgers have to go to that stadium and play a couple games in the World Series. Hopefully the only 2 games, right? Hopefully the Dodgers wrap it up at home in Game 4 or 5. And they don't go back. It's going to be tough, though. Toronto is going to be very loud. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to be posting daily videos. We've got the morning shows on Thursday, Friday, and probably Saturday as well. So 3 days this week of morning shows. Myself and Brad J talking Dodger baseball here as they are now in the World Series. And then we'll be, of course, recapping the games at night. So a lot of stuff going on. This is the biggest time of the year for baseball, and it's now, an opportunity for the Dodgers to go back-to-back for the first time in their franchise history. But it's going to be a tall task, right? Going to go on the road against Toronto, who's been playing well and has a lot of momentum. As we know, it's very important come this time of year. As always, make sure to subscribe. And let's go Dodgers. Woo!